welcome to Voices of the West. Today we are being joined by Gary Diamond, which conveniently is a lovely last name to have coming from Kevin Diamond here. Gary, thank you. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm in the prime of my life at almost 68 years old. Been writing since I was probably 8 years old, in different shapes or forms. It started as a hobby, as most writers. It becomes a lot more than that. And I've written in comedy in the beginning, with on my own, and then with a partner, with a modicum of success in the UK, and then started probably about 4 or 5 years before I started to retire. I got into novels, and then particularly into Western novels, although not exclusively into Western novels, but mainly into Western novels.
Indeed, you have Harbinger Island that's coming out from DSP right now that is very much a mystery as opposed to a Western on that.
Harbinger Island is the first of 3 books. Eventually there should be 4. The 4th book finishes off the story. It's very, I guess you would call it quite English in that it's an English detective inspector. It's not just about a police officer, it's about his family, and it's about a mystery that involves the death of his wife that he didn't realize was associated with the case that he was on. In fact, in Harbinger Island, he doesn't even realize he's on a case until he goes to the party on the island, or the dinner party on the island. So the first book is the first in the Detective Inspector James Copperfield series. The second book is All Roads Lead, which I am working on at the moment in terms of relaying it out. The third book is a book called A Deadly Family Secret, A Deadly Family Reunion. And then I've got the last book to do. And that's the only thing at the moment that I'm doing that is non-Western.
Very good. And you have a number of series of Westerns as well, with the Culpeppers and with Stagecoach to the West that you just did, which that's even like, it goes a little beyond Western to an extent of that is showing a bunch of other things. And of course, all of the Parthena series as it goes there. Labeling everything off the top of my head here from what I remember on those.
Okay, there's a few out there. There's a few.
Yes.
Obviously, Culpepper is the latest in the Westerns, which I'm really very pleased with. It seems to be going well. It's had some very good reactions. It starts with Culpepper Book 1, Culpepper, Texas Bounty Hunter. That is a book that is not just about a bounty hunter looking for a prey or looking for a bounty. It's about the mystery of the man who becomes the bounty hunter and why he is on the trail of the person that he's on. And there's a lot of mystery surrounding Culpepper. And in book 2, we discover that there's more to him than just being a bounty hunter. He has a reputation for being ruthless, a reputation for never bringing in a captive alive. But there is much more to him than just being a bounty hunter. And that leads on to a new series that I'm writing, which is called Kit Harrison, Texas Ranger. And Kit Harrison appears in Culpepper Book 2. And there's going to be a crossover on each book. So in Kit Harrison, there's a Culpepper will be mentioned and slightly involved. And in the next Culpepper book, Kit Harrison will be mentioned and will be slightly involved. It's a bit like a crossover that you get on on TV programs. So I'm really excited about that.
Get them to love the characters in the earlier books and switch it back and forth a little bit, and then bring them into the new series.
Yeah, I
That's a
mean,
good
there's
book.
characters in Culpeper Book 2 that will appear in Kit Harrison and vice versa. There's going to be a matchup there. And I think that by doing it this way, I say that hopefully by doing it this way, it will give it a bit of longevity, because it won't always be about a bounty hunter. It will sometimes be about a Texas Ranger that has associations with a bounty hunter, and a bounty hunter that has associations with the Texas Ranger, although they will be independently titled Culpeper and Kit Harrison.
But lots of room for crossover in there across the board, which again sells both series very well.
Well,
So
I'm hoping so. I'm hoping so.
what takes a gentleman from England and puts him into Texas Rangers and bounty hunters?
That's a good question. I think it's a love of the Western genre that I've had since a child, both in movies, books, TV series, particularly in the 60s. I'm that old, where I was educated with series like Cheyenne and The Virginian and Bonanza. And I think that when those television series evolved, and I think they did evolve in the 60s and changed again a little bit in the 70s, where before the TV companies stopped wanting to make westerns and go on to just cop shows and detective shows. I think what I liked in programs like The Virginian and Bonanza was that you had lots of characters. In one episode, there'd be, say, The Virginian, and then the next episode, there'd be Trampus, and Bonanza would have Little Joe, and then the next one would be Hoss, but they would all be united by talks of their brothers and their friends, and it became more to me than a series. It became almost like, I won't say a soap opera, but it became along those lines of, I want to know what's happening to those characters, and I guess certainly with my Abraham and Lincoln books, I've taken that on board considerably. So that was what got me involved really with westerns. Movies. I mean, there's so many great movies out there that it's too. We'd have to be on here for another 4 hours for me to tell you all the great western movies that I love and the actors. And in books, I like books that are western books, and all books. I like books that are different from the last book that I read, and I try to write that way. Whether I get that right, I don't know, but that's what I try to do.
So picking up on that a little bit, what do you feel makes a good Western, even though you're saying right here that you switch the stories from whenever your last type of one was?
I think what makes a good Western is, of course, is the main character, and the history of the character, the past of the character, the relationships of the character. I think there are books that you could read that could be not Western, but could easily be a Western. They don't have to be a Western. We label things Westerns, detectives, historical, romance, but so all of those genres can be involved in one Western book, and certainly in one Western series. And I feel that a good Western book, for me, has to have some mystery in it as well. It's not just a gunfight or an adventure. There has to be something that maybe you weren't quite expecting when you get to the last chapter of the book. That's how I like to write, and that's how I like to read.
Very true. So when it comes to developing a Western story, do you start with a character in mind, or do you start with a particular plot or a story in line for that?
for me, it's been different in all the books that I've done so far. With my series of Moonwater, A Fool's Quest of Moonwater, it all came from a title. So I put that together from a title that I was looking for something that I could translate into Apache, and that came up, and I thought, well, that sounds good. I could do with something like that. With Parthena, it was all to do with Jack the Ripper, and which I know you think, well, what's that got to do with the Western? But it was to do with in the history of Jack the Ripper, that the Jack the Ripper murders stopped quite abruptly in Victorian London, and no one was quite sure what actually happened to him. Did he die? Did he get arrested for something else? Did he just stop and decide that was enough? I've killed enough people, enough women. Or did he get on a ship bound out of Liverpool and go to America? And that's what I thought. That's where I put him. So that was the whole story of Parthena. Really comes from Jack the Ripper. Abraham and Lincoln came from an idea that I wondered what it would be like to write a whodunit in the Agatha Christie type mode, with I won't say exact, not a Poirot, but a Poirot type character with Abraham Zyberman, and to make it into a different type of Western. But then I created Lincoln, which made it the Western side of an Agatha Christie novel. So for me, different things. With Harbinger Island, it was all about what happens in a world where you can't phone somebody or get somebody on the internet. So because I'm still of the age when I remember that how life was when there wasn't Google, and there wasn't a mobile phone, and there wasn't constant communication, and when you went out and something happened, and whether it be good, bad, or indifferent, you couldn't contact somebody unless you could find a public telephone box, which in England certainly was not the easiest thing to do, because if you found one, the majority of them were not working.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
nearby to pick one up if you do.
Yeah. So it's really I guess the answer to the question is I have no answer. They're different depending on the books that I'm writing.
That's definitely a solid answer on all of that. What kind of a Western have you long dreamed of writing? You've taken on Jack the Ripper, you've done Agatha Christie on things. What kind of things have you wanted to get to that you haven't gotten to yet?
Well, I've got ideas in mind for future Westerns. I think what I have to be careful of is not getting too wide. I need to complete A Fool's Quest of Moonwater. That's the third book in that trilogy. I need. I've got the story for the fourth Abraham and Lincoln, which is becoming a little bit of a soap opera and leads on from the third book. I'd like to do a story that involves the American Secret Service in terms of in the Wild West, and not obviously not the Pinkertons, but because I've used the Pinkertons in Parthena and also in Culpeper, but particularly to do with possibly the American Civil War, which is the subject that I've touched on in A Fool's Quest of Moonwater. So I think really with Westerns, the sky's the limit. Really, there are lots of anti-heroes you can bring in from different genres and place them into a Western scenario, and they work quite well. I think if I was to submit Parthena as a Western based on the very English Victorian originality of the story, you would think, well, is that really a Western? But it's more of a Western than it is of the Jack the Ripper or the Victorian London, although it does delve into that as well. So I think it's really, what would I like to do? I'd like to keep doing things that possibly are not quite expected of me.
Excellent. Kind of a parallel question to that would go, what elements of the West do you feel have not been explored well enough or still have not been developed enough for readers?
Oh, that's a hard question. I don't know if what's not been developed enough. I think that there are things that can be developed more. I read recently I Buried My Heart at Wounded Knee, the story of the American Indian, and I've got another couple of books which I'm reading on that subject as well. I think there are elements of bringing more into in the future into the early days of the settlers and the early days of the American Indian, where life was changed so dramatically for them that I think stories became fables and not necessarily historically correct. And I think I'd need to be, personally for me, I need to be a much more structured writer to write something like that. But I think there's an awful lot of subject matter out there with regard to the early days of the West and the American Indian.
Speaking of structure, after you have your idea that you want to do for, be it the title or whatever else inspires you for a particular book, take me through the process of how do you go about writing?
Well, I do have a system, strangely enough. I'm a retired man who had been in business for many years, and I was very methodical in business, and I have to write lists. I'm a list writer, and I give myself targets. So I have chapter targets a week, and I have a list of my writing day, what I'm going to do. Each day might be slightly different. But I sit down in the mornings working on the books that I'm writing based on the list that I've given myself. I've got to hit those targets. Mostly I do, sometimes you don't, and then I try to catch it up the next day. So I'm very much a methodical person. My wife might disagree with that. But she does know that in business and where I was working, I was very methodical. So I try to keep that as. In fact, I guess I write like I'm still working, even though I'm not working. I write as if I'm in business.
Very much so. Do you have a set period of time each day that you write, or do you have a basic routine that you can fall into?
I have a routine. I don't give myself any. I did at the beginning. I gave myself hours of writing, and I found that when I did that, I was writing due to the hours and not due to the content that I was trying to put out. And I'd go back the next day and think, well, is that no? And I start again. So I don't limit myself to the hours. I try to write every day. I'm not going to lie, there are some days that I can't due to life. But 95% of the time I write every day. Probably starting more to late morning and into the evening until my wife slams, bangs on the door and says, "Your dinner's going in the bin if you do not come down and stop." But yeah, no, I try to write every day.
Excellent. Do you have any advice for people who are starting out trying to write, for just basically trying to figure out how do they get it done?
I'm not sure I'm the right person to give advice to anybody, because I'm still quite new to the author writing genre. Obviously, there are very many great Western authors out there, and most of them, a lot of them at least, are with DSP, and they would be able to answer that question with much more authority than I would. What I would say is, don't be afraid. Be confident. If you've got a story, try to develop it. Don't let people put you off, and not just to copy something that's already been done before.
Very good advice on all of that. Where can people learn more about your books and about you?
Well, on Facebook, I guess. I don't have a website as yet. I obviously I'm on the Dusty Saddles website. I guess it's with my books. If people want to, they can message me, and I can give them the links to the books. As I say, I'm on Facebook. I've been recently getting some great feedback on Twitter, or not Twitter, it's called X now, and that's been quite good. Yeah, I think there are, and Dusty Saddles have been very good. I mean, they've been so supportive to me, and they've created the most fantastic covers for me. I'm blown away every time by the covers that they produce, and the support that they give me in terms of marketing, the support they give me in terms of the advertising that they put together, even in a video. I can't thank them enough for what they've done for me.
Well, we definitely appreciate you being one of our writers. It's a good relationship going that way.
Thank you.
Well, Gary Diamond, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate you taking the time out.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Really enjoyed it.